going to be doing this contest coming up, and the only thing that's holding it up at the moment is getting a special email address so everybody can call in. And what that is we're going to give away free grass. But we got to clarify this. It's grass seed and grass seed for turf. Just to make sure that's clear for everybody to understand. And what that is we're going to give out as soon as we get our new email address, we're going to give that out to everybody, and we're going to give them a chance to weigh in on whether by the end of California's Governor Brown's term in office, if we're going to have an approval for the twin tunnels to pump water down to Southern California.
Right.
And so they can go in and say yes or no, and then we'll pick the winners from that, and everybody can win some neat prizes from that. And we'll probably throw in some gift cards too.
Yeah. So an announcement and some contest rules will be forthcoming.
Yes, absolutely. I have to wait for legal.
That's right.
It's always we won't do that thing at the end like on the car things. And then I don't know about you.
Get a speed talker to do the.
I don't know about you, but my eyes aren't as good as they used to be when I was like 20. But did you ever see those terms and conditions that they throw up? To me, they're fuzzy, and they're so freaking little. You can't read what it says. So.
Yes, the person has to read it in 4-point text and font. God,
it's amazing. It's amazing to that. Hey, we got a great show today. We have a couple of people that we know. One used to work with us, a gentleman named Paul McFadden, and he's going to be on first. And then we have somebody who has 37, a colleague. I'll say he's a colleague.
Hey, you can say that.
Yeah, we're not in his league, though. He's been in the business for 37 years, and he's a famous news weathercaster for NBC News Television on Channel 4 in L.A., Mr. Fritz Coleman, so he's going to be on after that. And that was a humbling thing. He was just an awfully nice guy.
Very down to earth, very graceful, and those of you who listen to the interview you'll hear that come through.
Yeah, someday we'll get to be like him.
One day.
We may be too old by that time. Well, anyway, we'd like to bring on our first guest, and I know Paul's on the line. Is Ingy on the line with you?
Yes, we are here together.
Oh, okay.
In beautiful Cardiff by the Sea, hosting this show from. We'll call it the radio station South.
Oh, okay. Because the engineer, when I asked the engineer who's on the line, he says, "Oh, I don't know." I goes, "Is it a guy or a girl?" And he says, "Oh, it's a guy." And I'm thinking, okay, is Ingy going to be on the call or what? We have the question, so we were prepared anyway. So
no, I would never leave you in the lurch.
No, I know you don't. You are the most professional person, along with Paul and Chris, that I know. So we're very happy to have you.
Well, thank you for the introduction. We're really looking forward to tonight's show because, hey, Paul's my previous co-host here on the Water Zone. We all know and love him, and it's good to have his voice back as a guest because, as you just said, Paul has moved on to a different position, and it's very exciting, and he's going to tell us about it and how it relates to the industry. So. Well, let me just. Unless you have any other announcements?
No, I just want to throw out the call-in lines in case anybody wants to talk to you guys, and you're experts definitely in your field. If you do want to talk to Paul or Ingy, please do so. Call 888-909-1050, or if you're in the mood for a local call, you can do 909-792-5222, and. I know Chris or anybody, he gives good phone. So we can answer the questions.
Absolutely.
We keep it clean. So, Ingy, it's all yours.
All right. Well, we got Paul here sitting next to me. Hi, Paul, thanks for coming over and doing the show here live with me.
You're welcome. My pleasure, truly.
So for the listening audience, I mean, they know you as the co-host, and we have had a lot of conversation on this show over the last couple of years, but I don't think that you've been on as a guest before. So let the audience know a little more about you. Your new title is Director of Inventory for RDO Water, and that is a major ag irrigation dealership here in the West, and Paul will tell us more about that. But just a little bit more about Paul's background. He's involved with agricultural production and sales, and both on the local, regional, and the global level, with a background in ag and commercial lending and finance earlier in his career, a self-employed agribusiness owner, and then more lately, sales and marketing management. He's currently the Director of Purchasing for RDO Water, which is a dealer distributor of irrigation solutions for agriculture. He was previously Senior Sales Manager and National Accounts for the Toro Company, and prior to that with John Deere Water as the Director of Sales for the United States and Canada. He's a Cal Poly guy, and I won't hold him against. I won't hold that against him because I'm a Davis gal. But yeah, he's got Ag Business Management from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and he's been really engaged in the industry. He's past president, chairman of the Legislative Committee, and current board of directors member of the California Ag Irrigation Association. Past chairman of the International Irrigation Association's Drip and Micro Irrigation Common Interest Group, the membership committee, and the Government Affairs Committee, and he's also an ad hoc member of the Western Growers Water Committee. And as we know, he was also a co-host of the Water Zone before he moved on. And most importantly, but not last but not least, he's married to Barbara and has 3 grown children, Michael, Megan, and Heather. And they reside in Escondido and enjoy outdoor activities like fly fishing, hiking, gardening, and hiking in Scotland for like 18 miles a day, which is, you might as well just tell us one snippet about that. I mean, he's just coming off of a hiking trip in Scotland before.
So my wife and I, my youngest daughter and her husband, completed a 5-night, 4-day hiking expedition through the Highlands of Scotland. We clocked over 50 miles during that 4-day period. The longest day was about 17.5 miles. It was one of the most exciting, also one of the most physically challenging things I've done in decades. It was outside of running a half marathon, I think it was probably right up there. So it was beautiful. The people were lovely. We saw a lot of agriculture there, which was interesting as well.
Can you?
Well,
After
17 miles, you would think that he'd have a nice glass of wine in that little Scottish hut, right?
Exactly.
And what I really wanted a picture of was Paul in a kilt, and I haven't seen that yet.
You may be waiting a while.
What was that, Rob?
No, I just wanted to clarify. You said you did the half marathon. That means you gave up the rest of the half, or how does that work?
Exactly.
Yeah, I did a whole one, and I wish I would have just done a half. Anyway, so Paul, tell us a little bit about your background and how your career evolved into ag irrigation.
It's rather mysterious, actually. I grew up around agriculture. My dad was in the farming business. My grandparents farmed oranges in and around Orange County. So I've been kind of very deeply engaged with agriculture growing up, 4-H, FFA, and going to Cal Poly. It wasn't clear to me where I wanted to end up. With a business degree, I felt that I could kind of go a number of different paths, and got into ag lending, and it was an excellent experience learning the ins and outs of financial analysis and tax returns and all that fun stuff, appraisals.
Lending, that's giving people money, right?
Giving people money.
Yeah,
exactly.
I would like that job. That would be fun.
It was interesting. And then off into the irrigation side. Ended up getting my first job with an irrigation manufacturer by literally slipping my resume under the front door after hours at Roberts Irrigation, a company that I went on to work for 12 years. It later became part of John Deere Water. So, and then recently with Toro, and then with RDO as the director of purchasing for their 8 locations in the U.S. and three in Mexico.
Well, tell us about this new position and how what I seem to understand is how your background with irrigation manufacturers such as Toro has really uniquely prepared you for this new role.
Sure. So I think one of the things that the RDO, to give a little background, is a wonderful family-owned company. Started out as a Mr. Offutt, started growing potatoes in South Dakota, or North Dakota, excuse me, and at 28 years old borrowed the money to buy his first John Deere dealership. Currently, the Offutt family is the largest potato producing family in the country. In addition, they are the largest John Deere equipment dealership in the world, I believe, with offices in the Ukraine and Russia, throughout Western United States, and even down into Mexico and Australia. So, and growing as much as they have, not only in the farm equipment side, but also in the Deere construction and forestry side. John Deere said, we're going to suggest that you grow outside the equipment business. And when John Deere suggests something like that, you listen intently. And so they ended up buying an irrigation distributorship based in Escondido, my hometown, and which had offices from Palm Springs over to Yuma, and then they acquired other locations up the coast, clear to Salinas, just south of San Jose. So today we have eight locations in California and Arizona, and 3 in Mexico. We just opened an office in central Mexico just recently. So again, kind of the family business that's grown, it's privately held, very professional organization. I don't can't say enough good things about the group and the people that run it. They're just outstanding.
Well, they're lucky to have you, and I'm sure that your input will help them become an even better supplier of solutions to farmers that help us grow our food. You know, bottom line, we need good companies out there to help us meet the world's growing food needs.
So I think that was really the impetus for the acquisition was the office came obviously from a farming background, and they're very invested in farming. Obviously, they grow 80,000 acres of potatoes and manage another 200,000 acres of farm ground. So irrigation is an integral part of that, and they completely and thoroughly understand the need for efficient water use, because a lot of obviously what they do on the equipment side is contingent on the use of proper irrigation techniques to grow higher quality and more quantity of food to feed not only this country but countries around the world.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. They're really vertically integrated then. I mean, it's a big farm, huge farm that has basically become integrated in the the equipment solutions side of the business as well.
If you've ever eaten a McDonald's French fry, the likelihood of eating an Offutt family-grown potato is very, very high.
Oh, well, speaking of food, we know that every Californian eats we know that the food that every Californian eats is dependent on agriculture, but it's also a very complicated industry, is the best I can describe it. Tell us how the ag irrigation business environment, including the manufacturers and dealers and growers that we were just speaking about, are changing to make food production more efficient and sustainable for the average citizen.
Sure. So I think you have to step back and you look at California as a state and the amount of water resources that we have. Outside of a couple of small reservoirs that were built in our area in Southern California, very few, if any at all, have been built since 1979, when the population of the state was 14, 15 million people. So now we're approaching 40 million people without any additional surface storage. And as you mentioned earlier, Rob, the conveyance, moving that water from Northern California down to Southern California, where the 3/4 of the need is for that water, it's a very complicated situation. And you take into account the groundwater situation and the overdrafting or overpumping of groundwater and all of the issues that's causing, including subsidence, where if the groundwater is the soil is like a sponge, and if you end up pumping too much, that deflates the sponge, And in one instance, I know a major canal in the Bryant-Kern system has decreased its capacity by 30% because of this subsidence in the South San Joaquin Valley. You can't pump any more water through it because it's going uphill. So it limits the capacity to move water around the state of California, which is critically important, as you both know, as our listeners know. So having said all that, growing food in California is becoming tougher and tougher with the restrictions. Number one, labor. Labor is an issue. The reduced labor force, and then the regulatory situation is becoming more and more difficult. And then, of course, water I would consider number three. So all those things affect the 250 to 260 crops currently grown in California, and the folks that are the families that farm those crops for our benefit, not only our benefit, but for the benefit of those around the United States.
Yeah, big challenge to make all those pieces work. Now, I have to say that my initial question was, it was an assumption that every Californian eats what, basically what the farmers grow. Well, I was just down at a trade show in Australia called OzVeg, where they were 3D printing food.
Holy mackerel.
And I was thinking, oh my gosh, the day of Star Trek and the Replicator may be here, at which time maybe we won't be growing food in the future. But for now, at least, the farmers are still growing the ingredients that go into the test tube that feed the 3D printer, thankfully.
I would prefer to go out to my garden in my backyard and pick a vine-ripe tomato personally, rather than go to my Xerox printer.
Yeah. Well, who knows what the future may bring.
True.
That was a very interesting show. A lot of futurists talking about what's happening here in the future. I know that you're passionate about food waste as well, and tell us a little bit about that. How much goes to waste? Why does it go to waste? What's happening to reduce the amount of food that goes to waste? What can we do about that?
So if we, it's a great question. I think if we go back and we look at farmers in the United States, or specifically in California, being some of the most efficient farmers in the world in terms of, if you go back and you say in the 1950s, the percentage of the population that worked on the farm post-World War II was somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or 40% of the people that were affiliated with growing food and transporting food and such. Today it's 2 or 3%. And those 2 or 3% of Americans that are involved in farming produce much more food than their predecessors post-World War II, just to feed the population, not only of the United States, but all the grains that we export and so forth, and cotton and soybeans and those kinds of things. It's remarkable. But having said that, there is one of the factors, the labor issue in around the country. The lack of labor to harvest the crops is becoming a greater and greater issue. We were talking earlier, Inge and I, about one of the largest food processing and growing operations in the world, where every American eats a bag lettuce that this company produces at least once every 3 or 4 days. Their average age of their workforce in the factory and in the field is 46 and 47 years of age. So to continue to do what they have to do, they have to automate or find folks that are willing to work in that to produce that bag lettuce that we all enjoy. I think the other critical factor for me is just waste. I think we in California, certainly in the U.S., we're, as a percentage of our budget, our financial budget, personal budget, food costs are some of the lowest in the world, and we've gotten quite spoiled, in my opinion, by not only the quality of the food, but just the way that it looks. And if there's one little scratch or one little blemish, or the banana's a little brown on the skin, it gets tossed aside or not harvested. today, 30 to 40% of all food grown in the United States is not harvested or is discarded post-harvest because it doesn't look right. That's atrocious to me.
That is
because if we would just accept a small blemish on an orange or a tomato or a banana, think what that would do for world hunger. I remember, my mother always telling me, be sure and clean your plate because there's somebody else in wherever that would give their right arm for that food. And we as Americans, and not just Americans, it's around the world, in Europe and other places, if it doesn't look right, we throw it away. The other thing I think that it's important to recognize, approximately 18% of all the food that we do buy at the supermarket, take home and prepare or just put in our refrigerator, goes bad, or the leftovers go bad, and those end up getting thrown away. Nearly 20%, 1/5 of all the food that we buy, we throw out because it just deteriorates or goes unused and begins to deteriorate. So I think keep in mind, my message, I guess, would be keep in mind those two things, that just because something has a little blemish on it doesn't affect the quality whatsoever. Don't just discard that offhand. And the other thing is, if be more aware of the food that you buy and prepare and utilize those things, because those two things alone could literally solve the world hunger problem if we were able to make it work correctly.
Paul, I have a question for you, if I can.
Sure.
For example, yogurt. I happen to go in and grab a thing of yogurt to take to work, and I noticed it was past the date that it says on there. And I don't know how clear that is to consumers, what that really means. Does it mean you don't eat it from the date it says you shouldn't, or it doesn't say you shouldn't? It says this is for best. How do the consumers know what that is? Can it go a couple more days from that, or is that really expired, or do you eat it and get sick? And my wife says, well, what do you think yogurt's made from? And blah blah blah. It's
right.
So how does a consumer know? How do the manufacturers tell people that this is when we think it tastes, this is at the last of its best tasting, but you can still good to eat it? I mean, I think there's confusion in the marketplace about what that date really means.
I would completely agree. And on one hand, the food producers want to protect themselves legally, and so they're being extra conservative on the expiration date. And then depending on the food group that you're talking about, it may go days, weeks, even years past those dates and still be perfectly fine to consume. I think there needs to be more effort in that very area, Rob, to clarify that so that consumers are more comfortable with the suggested date. So, but I would say it all depends on the food group. Yogurt, I think, probably would never go bad. It's cultured. I'm being facetious.
My wife is still alive, so I guess that's a true statement for that. I know years ago I was involved in a process called modified atmosphere packaging. And it's like when you buy potato chips, or even in the stores where they would keep the meat more red by putting it into an environment that had more nitrogen and things like that, because otherwise you start getting the brownish colors in the meat. And same thing with the deli foods, with the cheese and things. And even in potato chips, they don't just put them in a bag and seal them. They put some inert gas inside of it to keep it longer. And I think a lot of the consumers don't know that's happening. Not that it's a bad thing; it's a good thing. But there's a lot of things they don't understand about it. Just like organic, people want to know why does organic, one, what does organic mean, and two, why does it cost a lot? And you guys about a year ago did a show with a grower and had a nice explanation of why it costs more, because you don't use the pesticides and you get smaller crop yields out of that. I mean, there's so much that people don't know, and they just pick up on little sound bites, and then they go with that, and it's all misinformation.
all about education. We need to know more about these things that are so important, such as water and food. I think, as Paul said, we've been spoiled. We have taken them for granted. We're lucky as heck as Americans to spend so little of our budget on food. Other parts of the world spend 60% of their budget on food, and they don't have very much variety or availability. So we're very lucky. We shouldn't take it for granted.
No. I know my grandkids when they were little, and you take them to the restaurants and they order their food, and my wife says, "Don't order for me." She says, "Don't order a big meal." I go, "Why?" She says, "Because you're going to finish up, but the kids don't eat." And you see that in the restaurants. You know, the kids will order a meal, or the parents order a meal, and the kids eat, 20%, 30%, maybe 50%, and the rest is thrown away.
I think
That's terrible.
Yeah, I think as a society, though, we're really conditioned to expect everything to be perfect, right? Even in our food, and the food industry that promotes and markets this food tells you that. I mean, you must read the label. You've got to do this. Everybody now is involved with the whole farm-to-table issue, right? I want it fresh. So we're sort of got this mindset that it has to be perfect, right? So for some people, it's tough to accept something that is a little bit subpar.
Yeah, it might actually be healthier if it has a blemish.
Yeah, absolutely.
It means it didn't use a pesticide.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I like to cook stuff, right? So, and I will ripen bananas to a degree where you wouldn't want to put it on the table and eat it, but it works perfect in a menu.
In a smoothie.
Yeah.
Perfect for the smoothie.
All right, so we got to take a couple of minutes.
No, we got time. We got time.
Sorry.
No, we're good. Keep going.
Okay, so
I'd just like to talk to Chris and mention or reply to Chris's comment about the food companies are pushing for the perfect food. I haven't found that to be necessarily true. I think the consumers are the ones that are driving it more than the food companies. For example, I look at baby carrots. The baby carrots were something that was developed to fill a niche by consumers, and they took all the carrots that had been culls or cracked or split or broken, and they formed them into those baby carrots where they normally would have been thrown away, but they just changed the appearance. And now we eat those quote-unquote baby carrots probably in a greater percentage than we do standard carrots. So I think it's more a consumer and viewing this product is acceptable or unacceptable than the food companies actually dictating that it has to be perfect, in my opinion.
Well, you've burst my bubble on baby carrots, Paul.
Do they do the same with the
did
baby?
you actually think they were little baby carrots that were grown in that size?
Sure, I thought, by the millions they, and just harvest them right out of there.
Well, does that apply to the baby corns?
They're just milk.
Baby corns.
They grind them down and make them look pretty.
All right.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's hear from Paul a little bit more about his national perspective on California and the West. And he and I have talked about this at length on our own over the years. So I'd like the audience to hear a little bit about this. So, Paul, your perspective on California and the West, how does it differ from the rest of the country? And what's the significance of that difference?
Well, we could take a whole hour.
Oh, is that a biggie? Yeah, when we started delving into organic, it was like, that's another show.
Yeah.
Talk about organic.
Well, I think
California
is a very interesting state, obviously very diverse, 260 different crops, versus Nebraska, I think there are one, and number two is a distant second. It's corn, and corn. So we have a huge variety, and there are probably within the state 6 to 8 separate regional areas that have very different views on water and water use. I'll just use, for example, Southern California, and then in Riverside, for example, with all the oranges and so forth, and then you go out to the Coachella, Indio, Brawley, and that water use situation, completely different sources, typically different uses, different water rates. and then you go into Orange County and some of the farming that still is continuing down there with a former guest and Secretary of Agriculture for the state, A.G. Kawamura, growing under power lines, and then you go on up to Ventura and Oxnard, and how diverse it is up there with water use and the salinity levels. So
it's a lot different than corn, which is what you see in the Midwest.
It's much different. We don't even have to leave Southern California to get a pretty vivid illustration of that. So
I don't think the Easterners have any concept of how diverse it is.
I don't think so. And in folks that I've had the honor to lead in tours and so forth of California agriculture are astonished. Big farmers from Georgia and Florida come to the San Joaquin Valley, and their jaw drops as we head down the grapevine, literally, and looking at the size and the scope of that farmland before them. It's just astonishing. But having said that, our water issues kind of mirror those 6 or 8 geographic regions throughout the state. They each have different needs, wants, and desires for that water, and it's a very complex issue. Water rights in the state are different,
different
than other states. So groundwater is challenging. Mark Twain's famous quote, "Whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting," couldn't be more true, and hasn't been more true than it has been in the last decade in California. So lots of different interests for water and farming throughout the state of California. But also, on top of all of that, it's one of the most fertile areas in the country, in the world, for growing food, and most productive.
So we have that unique Mediterranean climate.
It's true.
It's unique. There's only 3 or 4 places in the world that will grow what we grow.
If we grow, 99% of all the almonds in the world right in California, that's a million acres of almonds. That's considerable. So lots of diversity. Where the future is going to go, I think a lot of it's going to be driven by regulatory, first labor, then regulatory, and then water issues. Are we going to have the water to continue to farm? And are we going to have a labor or the technology and the labor to operate that technology at the farm level to eliminate the aging population in the farm community in general?
Well, you've held leadership roles in many different organizations. Maybe you can tell us about what they're doing about these challenges, such as the California Ag Irrigation Association, the Western Ag and Conservation Coalition, which is really a cool, unique group of people, and then the IA, the Irrigation Association. What are they doing to help us solve some of our challenges between rural and urban populations?
So let's first talk about the California Ag Irrigation Association. That's a group of irrigation manufacturers and dealers, academics, and consultants that do business in the state of California. There's roughly 80 members, 80 member companies that are involved up and down the state of California. And our mission is to promote efficient water use in the ag community. So we offer classes as an organization. We have meetings twice a year, once at the Tulare Farm Show and once it moves around the state, where we bring in speakers that address the legislative issues. And this year, obviously, the Farm Bill is a huge topic because that's up for vote. So we'll be talking about the Farm Bill. We'll also be addressing state water issues, like you mentioned earlier, Rob, the conveyance around the Delta through the, what is it, 1 or 2 tunnels now. It's unclear what's on the table and how much it's being funded. But so we talk about things like that, and just it's an educational group helping distribute information on legislative issues and things technologies that may help. The Western Ag and Conservation Coalition is a group that I've been involved with for some time, a few years anyway, 4 or 5 years. And I'll just read you the list of names. There's the Family Farm Alliance, Public Lands Council, Montana Stockmen's, the Nature Conservancy, the Audubon Society, the Irrigation Association, Trout Unlimited, KCAAA, which is an engineering firm, the Environmental Defense Fund, Wyoming Stock Growers, Western Growers, Montana Cattlemen, the California Farm Bureau, and the California Ag Irrigation Association. So it's a blend of groups like the Nature Conservancy, Environmental Defense Fund, Trout Unlimited, environmental groups. We got together with groups like Western Growers, California Ag Irrigation, Farm Bureau, and said, okay, we know we have differences, but let's work together, find common ground where we can go to Washington, D.C. and lobby on behalf of intelligent legislation to solve the problem of being good stewards of our streams and rivers and the wildlife that is tied to those streams and rivers and lakes, but also provide water for farms and do it in an intelligent and long-term viewing manner. And it's been extremely interesting to work with this group. What a diverse group, but I'm proud to be a part of it. There's some very, very sharp people that we don't always agree, but at least we come to the table and leave our big sticks outside, and we sit down and we talk, and many of us have become good friends. And I think we've had a pretty dramatic effect on water and water-related issues in the United States. The last group is the Irrigation Association, and we've had folks from that group on the radio program in the past, but they're a national organization and similar to the California Ag Irrigation Association, focused on education, raising the awareness. They have a lobbying effort to promote efficient water use, both on the turf and golf side, but also on the agricultural side across the country. And they've taken that message and help it spread into Europe and to Australia and other parts of the world, all about being good stewards of our resources that we've been so blessed to have. So all those groups working together. The intention is to have farmland and have food, fresh food, and water for our children and our children's children for generations to come, so they can enjoy a fresh tomato from their garden rather than a 3D printer, perhaps, or something. So anyway.
And a healthy environment.
And a healthy environment.
To enjoy it in. That's what I love about the Western Ag and Conservation Coalition, is that where do you see that diversity of groups working together? And we need to do more of that. And we need to find the common ground. And that's exactly what that group is doing. You know, finding that common ground and working together, even though, as you said, they might have some differences.
Well, we're up against the break. We got to go. Paul, we're gonna probably have you back to finish up on some stuff. But we got to go to a break right now, and then bring on our next guest. So we do appreciate you and Ingy coming on the show, and we miss you guys.
Well, we'll be back next month.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Rob.
Absolutely.
Chris, it's good to be with you all. Thank you.
We miss you. We miss you a lot, you guys. So, all right. So stick around for the second half of the. Actually, it's not really a half, a quarter left of the Water Zone show. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
Did you know that an irrigation system that has a leak of just 1/32 of an inch in diameter, that's the thickness of a dime, wastes 6,300 gallons of water per month or 75,000 gallons per year? Well, with more solvent cement experience than anyone on the planet, Weldon formulates their products not just to meet a standard, but to exceed it. Weldon products are designed to provide even greater safety margins, often able to make up for common mistakes or less than ideal installation conditions, reducing the chance for leaks and costly callbacks. Weldon's invention of solvent cement over 60 years ago revolutionized the piping industry. From day one, Weldon has led the industry with their broad range of high-performing solvent cements, primers, and cleaners, bringing unique solutions to professional contractors and homeowners. Along the way, Weldon has earned the loyalty of millions of professional contractors who trust their products and depend on their outstanding customer service, live technical hotline, troubleshooting services, and free training. And because they care about the environment, Weldon was the first manufacturer to develop and offer a complete line of low VOC cements. Their hottest formulation is Weldon 750 Hot Weld, a one-step, fast-setting blue PVC solvent cement specifically formulated for superior, long-term, trouble-free performance. So whether you're a professional contractor or just a backyard do-it-yourselfer, choose Weldon, the trusted global leader in solvent cements for leak-free plastic piping systems. To learn more about their complete line of products or technical training, visit the web at www.weldon.com or call their technical service hotline at 877-477-8327.
Let's talk drought stress. No one likes burnt plants or grass, especially your customers. So when it's hotter than a tin roof in Tallahassee, what are you going to do? Water the problem away? Not only does that abuse a vital resource, it's illegal in many cities. Here's a quick and easy solve that won't get you in trouble with Mother Nature or Johnny Law. Applied as a year-round program, Moisture Manager from Lesco supplements regular irrigation by attracting moisture to treated areas, thus making the moisture available to plant roots. This maintains wettability between waterings and rainfall, allowing soil to accept water as it becomes available, and making the water more accessible to the plant roots. Boom! More green, less watering, and a great new reason to see your customers on a recurring basis. With Lesco Moisture Manager and Site 1, high heat is no sweat.
Hey, welcome back to the Water Zone, and we're going to play a little thing that we did with NBC News weathercaster Fritz Coleman, and what a great guy he is, so let's bring him on. We're just neophytes. We don't do what he does, and I wish I could be like him and speak like him and do all of that, so we appreciate that.
Oh, my goodness. I don't know what to say. That's very nice. But as I was telling you, I like what you do because this is an avocation for you, a passion, and I think the best work is born out of passion. You see that a lot with people here, people who are of an environmental bent and people that look to the future and see that water could be a huge issue if we don't get our hands around the infrastructure, the conservation, and everything.
Absolutely.
Well, we could see that this was something that's an avocation for you as well, right? We could see your interest during the presentations here, and your verve for all of the things that are water related. That all the moderators.
Well, this makes me a better weathercaster. What's interesting is it makes three-dimensional what I do at work.
Oh.
I talk about it. I with great hope say we're going to get something to fall out of the sky. But what I don't talk about is what happens to the water when it hits the ground. That's what this is about. It's the distribution of it. But what I'm so stricken by, this is my second year, is the complexity of this issue. Because of our population in California, because of our odd geology, because of the overarching drought that we have, there are so many complicated questions that have to be answered in order to get a sufficient amount of water to everybody so they have a quality of life. I think one of the most interesting concepts today that came out in one of the first discussions was the fact that water goes first in line, first right. I don't know if that's exactly the way they describe it. That's so fascinating to me. You know, because in the Northwest you have tribal laws, and some of these Native American reservations that have rights to this water going back into the 1700s and stuff, and they have the rights to water because they were there first, and that complicates everything. Regardless of what the need is downstream, they still have the rights.
Right. It's first use, first right.
Yeah, right.
Right. So I mean, you look at the state of Colorado, for example. Every drop that falls out of the sky belongs to the state of Colorado.
Right, and as was recognized by our wonderful guest keynote speaker, that's going to become a real issue. Because we in the southern third of the state borrow a lot of water from the Colorado River. They're in the midst of the worst 17-year dry period in the history of since they've been keeping records, and are forecasted to have even more intense drought between now and like 2050. Wow, we're going to have a problem. I mean, I don't know what the percentage of water is that we get out of the Colorado River connected with the aqueduct and everything else to the north, but it's huge for the southern part of the state, so it's something we're going to have to address.
Yeah, and as many of the speakers said, there's no additional water supply available, right? The earth is it's a fixed system.
It's
right?
a closed loop.
The water that's here is the same water that was here 3 billion years ago, and it'll be the same water that'll be here 3 billion from now, right? There's not a pipe coming in from outer space delivering more.
We're just recycling it over and over and over.
Yeah, so there were two things that are going to, last year what stuck with me was the discussion of the Oroville Dam. And it was fascinating because they had the man from the Army Corps of Engineers here describing what a complicated fix that was. And if it weren't fixed, it could have been a catastrophe that we couldn't even calculate. But this year, the two things that really stuck with me are, as I say, the first right issue. Yeah. And also the fact that conservation has unintended consequences. The fact that if we don't keep the water moving through these collection systems, that bacteria and viruses and bad things grow in the delivery system, so we have to move it through the system. So we're conserving it, but we actually have to allow the system to cycle through, otherwise it's a health threat. Who would have thought of that? We congratulate ourselves on conserving water, but that was a really interesting point that I hadn't even considered.
One of the things that interests me in the first gentleman you introduced, Robert Hartman, the hydrologist, when he said, well, it doesn't really pay to go build new dams or because of that, and there's no space and in the future. But we need to plan for the future. We can't wait till all of a sudden we have a crisis and then react. We're not proactive enough in the state.
No, I think that's what was hopeful about what Brenda Berman said, that these are things that her staff is trying to address now. Looking at these forecast models and seeing where we're going to be as to drought and a population and those kinds of things. So you're absolutely right. Interesting time.
Yeah, I think the technology has changed, and since you've been doing your weather for many years, how has it helped you with all this new modeling and all the new technology that's out there? And because I'm sure you have a staff of meteorologists who feed you all this information.
Well, no, when we're on the air, we're all responsible for our own story, as we call it. We're like all news reporters. Our job is to tell a story.
I like your drizzle reporter.
Yeah, there's that.
That's hysterical.
What we do is exactly what any television reporter does. You come into work today and you decide what your story is going to be. So if I were working today, and I'm not, thank goodness, I would say the big story is the early overcast, the earlier clearing, and we're going to start getting warmer today. So when I decide what my story is, then I have to go in and find the data from the National Weather Service, both Oxnard and San Diego, to help me tell that story. So as I say, I don't get into hydrology, although we use the hydrological measurements to be able to report to people how much rain has fallen, and how close to being over their banks rivers are and all that kind of thing. But we don't get into it. That's why this has been so educational, and I think it will help me in just sort of understanding how to react to flash flooding and just how to put a spin on it when it's time for me to talk about rainfall or lack of it. And I don't do this that much because I've been around too long, but a lot of weather people are very cavalier. And, oh, it's going to rain tomorrow, but don't worry, the sun will be back out on Saturday. Well, you don't understand. We need water. Are you crazy? Why are you reacting that way? This just helps me to be more sensitive about how much water we get, how much water we don't get sometimes. You know, it'll make me better at my job.
Do you see more of your audience and the people around that you see outside and everything? Do you think they're getting to be more sensitive about water in California? Or it's just a story?
You know, it's like catastrophe is the mother of invention, or whatever they use. This last drought, because there were city and county mandates for conservation, then people have to own up or they're going to pay the fine. Yeah. I think during those crises, we tend to get more sensitive to it. But what we need to do is to get into a mindset where we're always conscious of it so that it translates into our behavior in our homes and elsewhere. So we're not just cutting back because some elected official said we have to cut back this month.
I think we're beginning to see that now with the younger people,
so.
especially, right?
Oh,
because
yeah,
they're
the
growing
millennials
up in the conservation mindset
just,
already.
They astound me at their awareness of stuff. Yeah. So they'll be the ones that will save us from ourselves, I hope.
I do too. What do you see the view or the purpose or mission of the media to help educate the public on water issues? I know they do news stories and everything else, but I mean particularly on water. What?
I think it's incumbent upon the media to, especially in states like California, where this is a real sensitivity for us because we're the desert Southwest. I think it's incumbent on us to do it. We have a couple of things pressing in on our ability to enlighten people, not only about this, but about anything that's important. And that is the short American attention span. And the fact that people have the control over their televisions with a clicker. That has shortened the amount of time we spend on any given story. It makes the most compelling and often violent videos what we present to people, because people don't tune out when they're jarred, you know. And often when you get into the weeds with discussions like the science of water and hydrology, it's a little dry, forgive the expression. And so these are things that don't make their way onto local television. And I'm not apologizing for it. I think it's unfortunate. I have a boss where I work now who sees the importance of this. We did a half-hour special on El Nino. We did a half-hour special on the drought. He puts resources and manpower onto these issues, but that's our boss. It's very subjective. But I think it's the media's responsibility. I was talking during one of my introductions in here today, after we watched those testimonials that people gave about how clueless they are, about what happens when you turn the faucet on, where it comes from, and who pays for it, we're not doing our job. I mean, maybe people would be even more sensitive and more willing to participate in conservation if they knew where water comes from, how it's paid for, how the infrastructure works, where we borrow from. You know, a lot of people in Southern California, and I get into this all the time because we do stories on the snowpack, which is most important. Not nobody, that's wrong, that's a blanket statement, but many people don't understand how much water we borrow from the northern and central Sierra, the snowpack, the Delta region up there, the Colorado River. We're down here humbly begging people to please send water, because that we get it from other people. Right. They have no idea how precarious that is. You know, so we should educate. It's a very too long of an answer to your question. I think the media should be more forthcoming. It's
like hearing the last comments from Mr. Kapal and Paul Jones versus the state senator. It almost seems to me that they always rush, they being the government. In California, they passed over, I believe, 800 and something laws last year. I don't know how. We got to cut that a little short. We'll bring that back next time to finish it up. We're getting close to the news hour, which we can't miss. Otherwise, we get crucified by NBC. We have to do it right. So, to be good stewards of the radio air, we're going to turn it back over to NBC News and let them do their feature story. Maybe they'll have one on us someday. Who knows? Anyway, that was great. Fritz is a great guy, and we appreciate he spent the time with us to do that. Any good words, Chris?
Nope, but always remember to
Think blue. So everybody have a good week, and we'll talk to you next week. Next week is IA training, learning all about valves. So listen, all you homeowners and professionals, you're going to learn something really good from the irrigator tech man. Catch you later.
Have a great week, everyone.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM, and now 102.3 FM.
This is Joe Lyons. Guardian Jet Center honors America, now in its 242nd year as the world's leading democracy.
242 years ago, a small group of men changed the course of American history. One of those men was a lawyer from Pennsylvania, George Ross. Active in state affairs, Ross was a popular political figure in his home state. Representing Pennsylvania at the First Continental Congress, he was a loyalist who presented convincing arguments against breaking with the mother country. But in the space of a year, he changed his mind and returned to the Second Congress as a Pennsylvania, where he presided over one of the most important cases involving states' rights and the powers of the new federal government. On Independence Day 2018, we remember George Ross of Pennsylvania, who signed the Declaration of Independence and became a founder of our American Republic.